Hi, it's Marisa. This is my culture identity final project. It may be over a little more than 3 minutes, and I do apologize. Let me just put it in slideshow mode. So, some of my identity traits is that I am Irish and German. I'm 22 years old. I am American, and I was born in Michigan. Some of the groups I'm in, I'm a Christian, I'm a daughter, a sister, a friend, a college student, and I work in retail. And some of the hobbies I like to enjoy is singing, hang out with family and friends, creative writing, reading, and cheerleading. I had many influences that have shaped me, definitely family and friends, religion, community, life experiences, and education. I was raised in a very loving, supportive family, and I stayed true to my beliefs. My grandma Janet was one of my biggest role models because she was such a great person. As I was raised as a Christian, my moral values deeply reflect that. So I do celebrate like Christian holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving. And some of the things that we like to do is pray in the morning and night. And then in the Christian tradition, we like to turn off all the lights off and then ring a bell so an angel gets their wings. I was also raised in a small community, so I definitely think deeper connections are better than just like less deep of ones. Since I was diagnosed with OCD, this can be a hard trait, but since I am introverted and distant at times, I definitely think that's really important to not really shape that as me and to be more personable. Some book examples, because we had to use the book, is that Kennedy argues that religion is the oldest source of human identity. Religion and religious identity can clearly be regulators of how we live our lives. I think religion is one of the most important factors to make up on how I view the world. I try to base a person by the way that they are and the way that they are as a person versus a stereotype that a culture has made them have, because I just believe everyone can be good. I also did another quote in the book that says we can have no direct knowledge of a culture other than our own. Our experiences with our knowledge in other cultures is limited by the perpetual bias of our own culture. Basically, that we need to understand culture and understand our life experiences through life. Some communication techniques I definitely use is definitely verbal and nonverbal, but when it comes to different situations like personal settings or family and friends, it definitely varies. In a personal setting, I do verbal by like speaking professionally. It's in a nice tone. When I'm talking to managers and customers, it's always like super nice but direct. And when I answer phone calls, I kind of have like that higher tone of voice. Some nonverbal ones I like to do is smile. I like to do direct eye contact, and I like to do the right amount of physical distance. But when it's family and friends, I like to use face-to-face communication because it's more personal and interconnection to me. So we use slang inside jokes, phone calls, and messages. I love hugs. I make sure that there's no really any distance. I use gestures like thumbs up or like just funny things like that. I think it just really depends on what kind of context you're in when it comes to communication. And then for the communication theory that we had to use, I use Edward T. Hall's. He used a frameworks of communication models that were interpreted by how knowledge is understood differently in other cultures. Another quote that I use in the book was it says, high context culture is less to be said or written because more of the meaning in the physical environment, while in lower context, little of the meaning is determined by the context between the messages encoded by the explicit spoken code. And then we had to use it based on an article, and I used the article on intercultural communication differences between the United States and Vietnam with implication for future relations. And the quote is basically just saying that another distinction between cultures is whether they are seen as a high context or a low context. Lower context means that the United States value explicit meanings of verbal communication, or to borrow a phrase from the 1960s telling it is what it is, but is also described as linear, in which speakers are expected to come to the point of moving in a straight line of logical thought throughout the subject to a stated conclusion. I also use another model of the theory for Hall's context is between monochronic and polychronic orientation, and that's when the cultures see different time based on that. Since I was raised in a lower context culture, I'm definitely monochronic because we are punctual and we believe time is precious. Versus polychronic people, they think that it's spontaneous and it's different like that. Um, we had to use an article how many things should we use at once, and it says that in his observation that indicates that people with a monochronic orientation are task oriented and they emphasize promptness and a concern for others' privacy, stick to their plans, seldom borrow or lend private property, are accustomed to short-term relationships with other people. Conversely, people with a polygonic orientation tend to change plans, borrow and lend things frequently, emphasize relationships rather than tasks and privacies, and build long-term relationships with family members, friends, and business partners. I know that was a lot of information, but I also used a quote in the book, and it says how we use time varies from culture to culture. So he believed that no matter what kind of culture you were in, that was the reason on how you see time and the orientation that comes along with that. And then I just used my APA citations for articles and books, and that is the end of my PowerPoint. So let me get out of that for a second.